Hi everyone, this is Professor Miller and I want to walk you through comparing three types of learning and those different types are classical, operant, and observational learning. And so when we're looking at these, we want to make sure that we remember who coined these phrases. So we're starting off with classical conditioning, and in this event, classical conditioning was coined by Ivan Pavlov. Remember the dude with the dogs? You probably read about that in your book already. And what he found is that the dogs actually had an involuntary response to something. So classical conditioning is involuntary. It's not something we plan. We instantly just kind of come across it. And what we do is we learn through pairing of two stimuli. So when we're looking at Pavlov's experiment, remember he walked in to the dogs, he's actually testing their drooling. And when he does this, he realizes that after he's encountered them several times bringing them food to make them drool, he realizes suddenly he just has to enter the room and the dog begins to drool. So with classical conditioning, the dogs actually paired two things together, so they became one. What they paired together was Pavlov meant food. So Pavlov and food were associated to each other. We're going to go into more detail in this in a minute. Now, when we're looking at why we do what we do and we're looking at consequences, classical conditioning, because it's involuntary. You don't choose to learn it, you just do. So the consequences really don't matter. So then we move on to operant conditioning, and we'll go into more detail on this later, but we're going to look at operant conditioning as coined by B.F. Skinner primarily, although he did work with Thorndike. And this is going to be voluntary, so I'm choosing to behave in a certain way. And the reason I'm choosing to behave in a certain way is because I either get reinforced, which means I'm going to keep doing it because I get reinforced or rewarded, or I stop doing what I do because I get punished for it and I don't like the feeling of that punishment. So it's either going to be reinforcement, continuing behavior, or punishment, decreasing behavior. And so therefore consequences are the whole reason for the behavior, because I'm choosing to do this to either avoid something or to get something. And then of course observational learning, this is going to be Albert Bandura and his famous Bobo doll experiment. And this is very much voluntary, and Bandura conducted the Bobo doll experiment and realize that children will mimic what they see. So with classical, we've experienced something. With operant, we've experienced something. But with observational, I don't have to experience it. I can just watch it happen and make my decision. So I'm learning through observing. And then lastly, consequences. You know, what we do is kind of like if we have siblings and we see one of our brothers or sisters get in trouble, we think, yeah, no, that's not worth it. So we'll watch it and we'll decide whether we're going to go ahead and do the behavior, copy the behavior. So again, we're looking at classical conditioning. Pavlov, his original study was on dogs, the salivation of dogs, and so what he did was he causes this almost reflexive reaction because he constantly brought food in, and so the food actually, or Pavlov actually meant food to the dog. So before we get with looking at the classical conditioning, let's go ahead and look at each story as a before conditioning and after conditioning. Conditioning just simply means I've learned. So when we're looking at the before conditioning, the dog drools when food's produced. I mean, that's natural. That automatically happens. I didn't have to learn. I smell food. I smell pizza. I drool. And so that's not really learning. So that's that natural, no training is needed. However, to make a dog drool at the sound of a bell, you're going to have to train him. You're going to have to train him. And so in order to train this dog, what I'm going to have to do is present that natural, that thing that doesn't need training, the food, at the same time that I'm going to give them the thing that does need training. So if I ring the bell at the same time I replace the food, and I do this time and time and time again, pretty soon all I have to do is ring the bell and the dog is going to drool. So you see the before training, no reaction to the bell. after training, reaction to the bell. So classical conditioning has taken place because now the dog is reacting to something that it really shouldn't react to. All right, so again, the Pavlov in the original study, the person that held the food was associated to the food, and so they were conditioned. Once something that should not cause a reaction does cause a reaction, I have learned it is now conditioned. All right. So when we're looking at this, when I am talking about something being conditioned, I simply mean it is learned. If something is unconditioned, I don't have to learn it. It's automatic. If something is a stimulus, it's a thing, a person, an event that causes something to happen. And a response is simply something that is a reaction. And if something is considered neutral, it should do nothing. All right. So now let's combine. These are the 5 terms that you're going to have to get used to in classical conditioning. So for instance, neutral and stimulus together, it's going to be something, right? Something, but I don't respond to it because I've never encountered it. I've never had a learning experience with it, so I don't respond to it. If something is unconditioned, it means it causes an immediate response. No prior encounter is necessary. So for instance, if someone brings in a shot, they're going to give you a vaccine. I see the needle, I've never encountered it before, that's going to be neutral. Okay. Now when I take that needle and I insert it in my skin, I don't have to learn anything. It immediately causes pain. So that needle started out as neutral. Then I suddenly have the encounter of pain along with it, and that's going to be the response. So these two, the unconditioned stimulus and response, occur together. No training is necessary. It happens the very first time. If you drink too much alcohol, the very first time you drink it, you're going to get drunk. There is no learning necessary. All right. Then we have the conditioned stimulus. This is going to be something that I have learned to respond to, much like the dogs learned to respond to Pavlov. And then the conditioned response is going to be that learned response. They drool. Okay, so let's go ahead. I want you to memorize this formula, write it down, and have it handy when you're taking your quiz, because this actually helps me figure out the different scenarios. So first of all, I'm going to have that automatic, that unlearned side, and then I'm going to have the learned side. So I've got the before, I've got the after, and that's going to include the neutral stimulus, unconditioned response, all on the before side. And then the after side is going to have the conditioned stimulus and the conditioned response, because conditioned means learned. So in Pavlov's study, we actually have a before and we have an after. So at first, Pavlov brought the food to the dogs, and the food made the dogs drool. So time and time, I'm bringing the dog. Pavlov brings food, Pavlov brings food, Pavlov brings food. Pretty soon, after a while, the dogs are going to begin to drool as soon as they see Pavlov. So at first, Pavlov meant nothing. After, he meant food. So I've learned something. All right, so when we're looking at this, I'm going to look at my neutral stimulus, my unconditioned stimulus, my unconditioned response, and then my stimulus, my conditioned response, and I'm going to look at these two sides, and I'm going to try to investigate what goes in where. All right, so we're talking about Pavlov's original experiment. Now, you notice the bottom two are responses, and for me, that's the easiest place to start off with. At first, what was the dog's response at the beginning of the scenario? There was a response that they had. That response was to drool, okay? Now, what actually caused the drool in the beginning before learning actually took place? Well, the food causes you to drool. There's no learning necessary. It automatically causes you to drool. The third piece of the puzzle here is the neutral stimulus. In other words, at first it did nothing. At first, Pavlov did nothing, right? All right. Now, after I learn, Pavlov makes the dogs drool. So if you can divide your scenario up into two different before and after, there was something that you did not react to at first, but you do by the end. there is something that you react to at the beginning, and it would happen to anybody, even if they had never encountered that item before. Food automatically makes you drool. A needle piercing your skin causes pain. A loud noise causes you to jump. So those are unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response. Now, do you see why I have the NS across from the CS and the UR across from the CR? Because once you figured it out, the NS actually becomes a CS. So I learned to react to Pavlov. And then I drool to Pavlov, even though that wasn't supposed to happen. I was really supposed to be drooling at the food. So hopefully this will help you understand just a little bit by dividing it in the before and the after, and what it takes to have a neutral stimulus, unconditioned response, and then the conditioned stimulus and conditioned response. So hopefully this helps you guys, and you are well on your way to understanding classical conditioning. Have a good one.